My dad preached every Sunday, went to dialysis 3 times a week, and worked until the day he died. Most people would see that as pure determination. But I saw what it cost him. He lost the love of his life after 52 years, and I watched him cry when no one else was around. I watched him pray and beg for healing, fight through pain, struggle, and I watched him continue to dust himself off, get up, and do it all again the very next day. For 14 months, every single day was a battle, and yet, somehow, he refused to quit. Welcome to the Girl in Ashes, episode 4. We left the end of the last episode with a very strong statement. I had to keep Dad alive. It was a new focus of my life. At the time, I truly believed that was my responsibility. Not because my mother had died, but because I was watching my father fall apart and break after losing the love of his life. The first night we came home, I heard cries and heartbreak that I had never heard before, in a deep breaking of a strong man that I never thought that I would hear. He was not a weak man. He was a pastor, a contractor, a rebuilder, a fixer, a man who always found a way forward. But this was different. The house felt broken. The silence was unbearable, and I became terrified of my next greatest loss, losing him. What I didn't know was for the next 14 months of my life, it would become the hardest, yes, yet most beautiful, most exhilarating, most exhausting months of my life. Because while grief was pulling us under, my father refused to quit. I know we talked about this at the end of episode 3. It was one of my cliffhanger moments. No one ever tells you what it really feels like after somebody passes away and you return back to the home that you lived in. My father, my mother, and I all lived in the same house during this incredible time. Actually, my whole life, I lived in the same house. I never left my parents. People may have judged me heavily for that, but I was solely focused on making sure that they were alive, they were taken care of, they were fully loved, and that I was doing everything that I could to please them in every aspect. Part of that became focusing on my career, focusing on the church, focusing on them. And although I had relationships and things along the way, none of them ever stuck, and most of the time they couldn't compare to me spending time with my mother and my father and my sister and doing the things over and over and over that I did not hate or regret. The 3 of us lived in that house. My sister had moved out years ahead of time. So for the past couple episodes that we experienced with my mother's falling apart, getting sick and passing, we were all in the same house. But as we learned, she is now rolled down a hallway away from us to prepare for her burial. And now I bring a devastated, broken, half version of my very best friend back home to the place that feels gross. So you kind of can picture where I'm at. And we're not going to talk a lot about me yet. That is coming in episodes ahead of time. This is going to feel like another repetitious focus on my father, but you imagine what it's like where nobody explains it to you. When we stopped at the house for the very first time, we were all together. My sister came to the house with us, and the house air felt different. The smell of the house was different. The feeling felt violated, like something was taken, robbed. It was an uncomfortable feeling, and it made you not want to be there. Like, can we turn around, hit the reset button? Something is wrong. You walk into the way everything was left with the intent that these people were going to return. Her recliner still in the same spot. Her clothes are still in the same spot. The clothes she left the house without to go to the hospital because she had changed. Her purse is there, but it's different. And that first night at the house wasn't even about or given the space for me to grieve the loss of my mother. It was just fully wrapped in the fear that I was also going to lose my father. My sole focus from the very moment that I went numb was to make sure that he stayed alive, because heaven forbid I have to lose both people. And all of our lives, we have heard of the stories of these lovebirds. When one passes, the next one goes shortly after. They're not going to last. Two become one. Souls are tied. They're not going to last. That is definitely not the belief that I wanted to live with. And it was just uncomfortable. The house felt violated, and then the devastation of my father's cries from the depths of his stomach, out of his soul. A sound that I have never heard, that I don't wish for anyone to have to hear. The outward sound of an inward heart shattered. I sat in my room, Indian style, on my bed with my sister next to me. We were both lost and confused and void, because the very part of our DNA has now passed. And we sit there listening to the strongest pillar weeping, and at the same time you have this gut-wrenching nausea and anxiety that won't quit. This feeling deep within your soul that no one at all explained would happen, that no one talked about would happen. So bad that I Googled, is this normal to feel anxiety that will not quit? In fact, it is normal. So buckle up, buttercup. If you're about to face deep grief, anxiety's coming for you. I know I mentioned that before. I just don't want you to forget. Sorry to break it to you. You will live through it. You'll get through it. It sucks. But I'm on the flip side. I'm still here. The world keeps moving even when all of that stops. So while we sit in our home, Indian style on the bed, Dad weeping in such a way that I'm literally scared that he is going to give himself a heart attack. I'm literally sitting there telling my sister, oh my gosh, is he going to make it through the night? Tears flowing from my eyes, anxiety, fear, void, numbness, all mixed into one, like a knotted ball within your pit of your soul, and you don't know how to even pull a strand to unravel it. The next thing that we have to do is start planning. I have to start planning the funeral. So the very next day, after we get home, we make it through the night barely. The very next day, we hit the ground running. Everything goes so quickly. Logistically, if you've never lost anyone close to you that you have to plan for, it's a hot mess, okay? I suggest pre-planning. Nobody wants to do that, but like, just do it for the sake of your children, your family. Just go do it, as morbid as it feels, because what happens to your leftover people here? Not fun. So the very next day we go and we look for flowers to go in the casket. We look for a casket. We go to the funeral home. Our whole weekend is filled with scheduling pastors, scheduling singers, scheduling flowers, sitting in funeral homes, scheduling caskets, scheduling ground dig up and burial and reburial and all of the things. And I was in business mode the whole time. Yes, Dad was with me the whole time, every step of the way. But as we sat at the funeral home, he sat silently and just looked at me with his dead eyes and said, "What do you think?" Sir, I need you to actively participate. This is the love of your life. I know you're broken. You don't want to face this. What do you think? You knew your mother. Okay. Let me handle it. And I did. And he participated. Of course, he gave his opinion. My sister did as well. Nobody was left out of this. But at the end of the day, I signed the paperwork. I talked to the funeral director. I scheduled the singers. I did the things. This was business. Not my mother. Yeah, I'm planning for something Dad needs done. Right? And so we go through that. I remain kind of numb. I can tell you completely honestly and 100% truthfully, I don't remember a lot about my mother's funeral. I know that a lot of people showed up. I know that she was a fantastic woman. She had a lot of accolades. The state overseers came. She was recognized time and time again for all of her wonderful works as a women's ministries leader, as a pastor's wife. It was a beautiful funeral, the parts that I remember. Family showed up. My dad's family showed up. Well, everybody, I guess, that could showed up. It was crowded. There was a lot of people. And immediately afterwards, we all went out to eat. We were not the type of family that says, bring us food. In fact, if you told us that you were going to bring us food, we said, no, thank you. And the reason why is because we did not want to be in our house. A lot of people go home and grieve in their house. We avoided. The least that we could be in that home, the better. The pivotal grounding of that house was no longer there. The foundation was broken. The piece that held it all together was not there. Why are we going back to the house? We're not going to sit there and just eat food. Sorry. A lot of people think that's weird. A lot of people did think it was weird. And we were not being rude, but we just couldn't do it. So we go out to eat immediately afterwards. We hang out with family a little bit. And the dust settles, as always. The funeral's over. The burial has ended. And now everyone must go back to your day-to-day life. Except ours no longer existed. Dad's day-to-day, Charity's day-to-day, my day-to-day, us fighting to keep her alive. Believing that her miracle was going to take place in a different way. That routine in that chapter closed. So the next day happens and the next day, and you think, what do we do next? And here's the pivotal part about it for me personally. Dad was never the same. The man that I talked about in episode 1, that there's never a no, there's always a rebuilding phase. Everything can be fixed. We can pull out of it. That man broke, and now I am facing a different version of this person. And it's just he and I for a little bit. We are going through normal routines. He still had to go to dialysis 3 times a week. He still had to try to get up and get dressed. He still had to get up and keep going because he needed to stay alive, whether he knew it or not. And as many days as he said he couldn't, he did. Okay, he still got up. We still did it. But I had to keep him busy. There was no keeping that man down. If you have learned anything about him so far, he is not one that wants to sit down and chill. He doesn't want to sit down in his house and chill. He only wants to chill at nighttime, like late. But during the day, he better not be in the house. He's not going to sleep in. He's going to get up and get going. So we weren't preparing for anything else but more life and to keep life going in the best way possible. We did keep going. We did. A lot of exciting memories happened in the next few months that had never happened before in our lives. And despite all of the broken grief, there's one thing that my dad, myself, and my sister had in common, and that was emotional avoidance and running. If we could run away from facing the emotional heaviness, we would. It wasn't much longer after my mom's passing that my dad decided for the first time in my entire life to go with me to the movies. Now, if you know anything about him and his strong Pentecostal upbringing, for a long time the movies was a sin to even go to. The reasoning behind him saying that he didn't want us to go to the movies is because back in the day, it didn't tell you what you were really seeing, so he didn't like to lead way for people to assume we were seeing something we shouldn't. Now it does clearly show in front of every door what door you're walking into and what you're about to be viewing, so that makes it a little bit better, right? But as we grow and change as adults and we find ourselves in new positions and new things, we realize that life is short and we're going to do things that maybe we haven't done before or haven't done in a long time. So about a month after my mom's passing, Dad went to the movies with me. It was something to keep us out of the house, keep us distracted for about 2 hours, and it was a movie he wanted to see. I believe the first one that we saw was the last Indiana Jones movie. I know he went to 2 movies with me. Yeah, the Indiana Jones one was the first one. So it was the latest and greatest Indiana Jones one. My sister fell asleep during that movie. It was rather boring, I just say it. But we did go, and it was a lot of fun. And we also went to the zoo together. 4th of July, we had went to SeaWorld. It was really funny when we went to SeaWorld, though, because that man was having a great time. He wanted to go to SeaWorld, and he had his motor cart, and the motor carts at SeaWorld have an overhang and a little clip for a fan, and he had a reusable cup with some ice water. So he was scrolling around just having a good old time, watching his shows, seeing some Shamu, some dolphins, taking some pictures with his girls, while I was having a heat stroke. Okay. It was like 100 and something degrees, and I was not in a motor cart with a fan. Now, he did not understand this. I don't understand. I feel fine. Yes, sir. I bet you do. You probably feel fine and dandy. It got so hot that I had to lay in the middle of a tile floor to try not to croak over at the SeaWorld on 4th of July. Little tidbit, if you're thinking about going to SeaWorld 4th of July, probably don't. Just don't. But we did all sorts of good things. We went to SeaWorld. We went to Disney together for the first time in years, and I was so happy that we went to Disney together in Thanksgiving of 2024. It was such a good memory that I wanted to have with him. I mean, keep in mind, this is still my best friend, my hero. This is like the it man that is like above all. And we went and he rode my favorite ride with me, Little Mermaid. And we have all these pictures with the Disney Castle and Tinkerbell, and he had his motor cart. Okay. We did women's retreats at the church. We did Halloween. I did my Halloween dress up time at work. We had revival in March. He still carried on revival. He was still getting up every single day and doing the things we were trying to live. And by the time the month of June had come around, he had finished remodeling a rental property, and we were finally listing it together. He had me take pictures and videos. We went out there together. We met the people. A month later, we were planning the next rental property we were going to flip. And I got to pick all of the colors and the flooring and all of the things because he wanted to have these sustainable moments for in case he wasn't here. For the first time ever, I planted potatoes with him, and he shared stories about gardening and how he used to garden with his dad and how I could make the potatoes better or worse and how I could grow more vegetables. We raised chickens in those months. We had a whole bunch of chickens at one time that just migrated to our house. They were not even chickens we bought. They just showed up and we raised them and we fed them. And Dad would hang out there and talk to them and throw bread out there occasionally. I know that's not really the healthiest thing, but yeah. Oh, my light died. He even got his golf cart for the first time. Something he had always wanted and didn't want to purchase. He finally made the purchase, and he was so excited about it because of his vision troubles, he couldn't drive himself. And a lot of times when I was running late from work and he was home, of course, he still didn't want to be inside the house. That never changed for him, honestly. And so he used the golf cart to go escape. He would go travel in the neighborhoods to the point where people in the neighborhoods started seeing him and recognizing him, and he thought that was cool. But he'd ride around in his golf cart, and he said he would talk to Mom. He'd go in the back field and talk to her and cry and wait for me to get home. He was always very afraid of being alone, and I don't blame him. I understand that mentality. It did put a lot of pressure on me of being always full of guilt if I knew that he wasn't at work anymore or he was alone in any way, shape, or form. But in those 14 months, there are a ton of pictures and a ton of memories because despite everything, he wasn't ready to quit. And because of that, we had experiences and did things and took trips and had journeys. But there was a flip side that no one else saw. Not a lot of people saw the happy moments either, very private. But there was definitely the part that I think is where the scarring takes place. A part that is hard for me to talk through, a part that is hard for me to relive, because we all know, as mentioned before, our brains would love to rewire tragedy. We don't want to think about it. I think it works in every aspect. When women have children, their body likes to forget about the pain and suffering, so they'll have more children. When we've been in terrible car accidents, we try to forget the trauma portions and give our testimonies of how we came out of it, the flip side, the good side. So rethinking about all of the other parts that no one saw is the reality. During this same segment of time, I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't resting. I was keeping watch. Because as we stated, my number one goal was to keep him alive. And that was my sole focus. And my routine looked very interesting. A lot of people who knew my routine and saw the tiredness in my eyes would go, "How are you doing this?" Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays was 5 a.m. get up times. Get him ready to go to dialysis, which he hated. Drive him there while he slumped over in the chair, wishing and waiting for God to heal his kidneys. Listening to Southern gospel music to ease his mind. Drop him off there and hope and pray that nothing goes wrong, that I don't get a sudden call from a nurse, that he's going to feel okay, that this day it's going to be a good treatment. And I would drop him off and I would head to work. And I would wait 3 hours to 4 hours till he called me, because he would call after his treatment so I can see how he was doing. And if he didn't call, I called him. And we would talk about how he was doing, how did he feel, what did the nurses say, how much fluid did they take off, how are you doing, how are you feeling today? That was always my concern. How are you? Where are you going to go next? It was the night times that were the hardest. And Dad would always try to tell me that he was fine. But our nighttime routine was intense. For quite a while, almost every night for the first several months. It would consist of making sure he ate, making sure he had his meds, getting his stuff prepared so he could go take a shower. He would go take a shower, and after his shower, you could hear him weeping, crying, broken. And then he'd get done, and I would do the back routine of putting the numbing cream on his back, putting the massage gun on his hurting muscles, making sure everything was laid out for wrapping his foot at night. All of the nurse duties to make sure he was taken care of. And during that time, I would talk about, how was your day today? We talk about our days. We talk about what he was thinking, how he was feeling in that moment, and also about futures. Those were the many times at night that he would say, here's what I've been thinking, whenever he would have his very few moments of clarity. But those were the times that no one else was around. When I would hear him cry and beg God, God, please open my eyes. Please stop the pain in my back. Please heal my kidneys. That he would go lay down to go to sleep, to try to rest. And his legs and his body and his muscles would jerk and jump so bad he couldn't get any rest. And he didn't want to be alone. So I would sit up all night. We would watch Family Feud and game shows, and I would talk about other things, and I would keep it distracting him until he'd fall asleep. And as soon as sleep would get him, I would do my best to slowly scoot off of the edge of the bed to not wake him. Tiptoe out of the room and lay my tired head down in my bedroom and pray to myself, God, let him rest tonight. Please give him rest. His mind, his heart, his spirit. And I'd get 2 or 3 hours before we'd start it all over again. I was so tired. I will tell you this, that if you ever have caregiver burnout, is what they call it, don't feel ashamed for having it or to telling somebody. I wouldn't tell anybody. I kept telling everyone it was fine. It's a very real thing. And it's hard, but I will be completely honest with you. As far as I've come, and as much as I have to tell you later in this story, I would do it again. It was definitely the most traumatizing thing I didn't wish on anybody. I don't wish any of you listening to this to have to sit in a room and hear that on the other side of the wall. To do everything in your power to keep this person alive, to keep this person encouraged. I don't want to negate the part that he got up every day and kept going. He had his own willpower, and I'm not saying that he didn't. I did everything that I could possibly do as a daughter, as a partner, whatever it took, whatever he needed. But his strength, his refusal to quit was his own. A lot of you may have been listening to this story and you think, wow, it was just me and Dad. And in a lot of ways it was. The late night hours, the really early mornings, the weekends, it was just me and Dad. But it wasn't always just me and Dad. There were other people who were also in this battle trying to support this man and love him to life. Love him to life. There was one specific person that I am going to talk about that helped carry the burden in moments when I just could not. My cousin that I'm going to talk about here, and I don't want anybody listening to this to feel like less than, or that I've forgotten all that they have done, because trust me, when it comes to my dad's family, they have shown up in many ways, in more than one. But this particular person, who claims he's going to listen to this podcast, so we'll see if he really does, because I'm not going to say nothing. Well, maybe I might say something. My cousin, who was like my younger brother, was one of the closest people to my dad at the time of all of this. During it all. They worked together every single day. So every single day, Dad was teaching him, being with him, and depending on him. He became a watchman when I was at work, a fixer with things I couldn't help, the person who would help get Dad dressed to go to work in the morning or go to a doctor's appointment when Dad had finally slept in later than before I could leave for work. He carried the very weight and burden as well and picked it up like a torch to keep this man alive. It was his goal as well. I trusted him with the most important person in my life. Every day, if I needed somebody to watch him, to pick him up, I trusted him to be the one. And my cousin and I shared that responsibility of keeping him going. And I didn't want to share this 14-month journey and leave out the part of the person who from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. kept that man alive, hydrated, picked him up off the ground, picked him up from dialysis, took him to hospital visits, and still carried the stress of, God, please don't let us lose him. You know who you are, and I will always be grateful for every bit of that you also had to carry. Yes, this is a podcast about the girl in ashes, but there were other people affected by the fire. I appreciate you. It was not easy on you either. And I hope that whoever's listening to this in their own grief moment takes a step back and says, who else is fighting this same fight with me who might be hurting right now? And hug that person. Tell them that you love and appreciate them because they're in this battle with you. I appreciate you so much. Every day. I make sure to tell people all the time what a great man you are. I do like to give Dad kudos for a lot of that. But I didn't want to breeze past the 14 months. The stories of my sister showing up, my trips that we've taken, the experiences and the memories, and forget about the Monday through Friday. If nothing else, the man who refused to quit taught us to refuse to quit. Now, through all of this, we were not looking for an end. We were looking for a miracle. So, also in this journey, we went to camp meeting in Tampa. Specifically, we had sat in the very front row because Dad wanted prayer from the brothers and sisters in Christ from all over the state of Florida, the famous ones, all of them. We were looking for a miracle. We wanted his kidneys healed. We wanted his vision restored. We wanted his back healed. We wanted his foot healed. There was a lot that needed to be healed, and he was believing for a miracle. That is one thing is for sure, that Dad believed that he was going to receive a miracle, or he was very much hoping so. Now, he never wanted to quit. He never wanted to give up. He had his days where he was like, oh, I should just die. Everyone has those days, I think. I think if we're human, we have those moments, those melodramatic moments. Maybe not everybody, but quite a few of us. I can speak from experience. I've had some melodramatic moments myself. But all in all, he was always planning for the future. We were planning our next rental. We were planning our next trip. He even said he wanted to go to the Sandals for Christmas time because he hated the cold and he wanted to be in the heat for Christmas time. I'm like, Dad, what are you going to do there? Lay out on the beach? Can you imagine? Go snorkeling? What are we doing? You can't get in the water with your dialysis port. Anyways. So we were always planning for the future. We were waiting for a miracle. So we went to camp meeting and he got prayed for. He had revival. We had prayer services, prayer chains, prayer cloths. And you know what? There was actually moments where it looked like it was going to happen. There was days we would have where his numbers at dialysis were better. His weight was steady. The nurses says, we can't even believe it, Mr. Bob. His vision would clear up sometimes and he would say, oh, I can see that nail. There's moments. Looking for that miracle. Aiming for that miracle. And those were the very moments that Dad would get down and pray hard in the middle of the night. That deep gut prayer, that God, I know that you can. I'm just waiting on you to do it in the name of Jesus. A lot of people compare Dad to Job. And honestly, I understand why. He lost the love of his life. He was on dialysis. His vision was blurry. His body hurt all the time. And even on Sundays, he would still go and stand behind the pulpit. Every week, he showed up for anybody and everybody. And people would say, your dad reminds me of Job. But what I remember the most is just his refusal to quit. Sometimes we talk about the future together. And in those very moments, I could finally breathe. I knew that he hadn't truly given up, that he was still holding into the faith, and that we were looking for something better. We were always looking for something better. It wasn't until the last couple months that his pain was so severe that it was unbearable. He had numbing cream that he had to put on multiple times a day. The middle of the night, he would scream in pain. And one night my sister was there and she wasn't used to the sounds, the torturous, knife to your eardrums, gutting, horrid sounds of his unbelievable screams of pain. And she finally got to experience it. And I sat there crying and I told her, this is what I've been going through. And he said, come pray for me. And she laid hands on him, and the power of the Holy Ghost, which we are Pentecost, keep that in mind. If you are not a family or a Pentecostal person, we believe in the gift and the power of the Holy Ghost, came into that room and they started speaking in other tongues and the Spirit was there. And there was that fog in the room and we just knew he was finally going to get rest. That was actually probably one of the most torturous nights we had ever been through. He couldn't rest to save his life, and neither could I. Life doesn't wait until you're healed. Sometimes you plant gardens when you're grieving. Sometimes you go to Disney when your heart is broken. You laugh when you're carrying fear deep within your heart. And you build a future while you're praying for a miracle. We spent 14 months refusing to quit. And looking back, I'm so glad that we did. There's a lot to unpack about all that I experienced in that 14 months. But the takeaway today is the amazingness of a man who refused to quit. The pain of a broken heart, the pain of a broken body, the pain of an unanswered prayer. And then getting up, dusting yourself off and saying, well, today may be the day of my miracle. Tomorrow I'm planning, and we'll see what's going to happen ahead. Now, on March 27th, it was a Wednesday, and it was a normal day like always. I had gotten up super early that morning, and that morning I was having issues with my heart. I'd lacked sleep and been under a tremendous amount of stress, and we had spent nights screaming in pain, one after the other, and I wasn't feeling well at all. And that morning, driving him to dialysis, I was like, he's like, what's wrong with you? And I said, my heart's bothering me. I just don't feel good. So he reached over and prayed for me that morning and asked God to give me a good day and to give me rest. And then he talked about how he knows I'm not getting sleep and he knows that I'm stressed and he's so sorry. And I was like, Dad, I don't care. I'll do it 20 times over. Don't worry about it. That day when he called me after his dialysis, he was in a chipper mood and he started arguing with me about doing an invoice. Well, if you can't do an invoice, and I don't even know what you're doing here working at the city, obviously they didn't teach you nothing. Can you just send the invoice so we can get paid? We had a little argument and I was like, I still don't even feel good, but fine, I'll do the invoice. And so I asked him how he was doing and he said, I feel fantastic. They took more fluid off of me today and I think I'm going to be good. And I feel like it's turning around. I feel good today. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm so glad to hear it. And I was truly so relieved. And we hung up the phone. And that day I got some bakery items with my friend. And after work, I was sitting there with my best friend and we were talking. And I looked at the clock and I said, oh my gosh, I know Dad's not going to be home late today. I really need to get up and get home before he's home by himself and he feels alone. And then it turns everything around. And then my phone rang. Hello?